It is the first Tuesday in Calypso History Month without the patron saint of the Barber Green. Once again, sleep in eternal power, Dennis Hall. And the thing is, there's a bongo night for him this evening. But we are speaking with another teller of truth, and this one doesn't necessarily put as much sugar in it. Afra Raymond is joining us to give a synopsis, his views on the budget. So we thank you for joining us this evening, sir.
Yes. Thanks, DK, for having me on the program. And the first thing I'd like to say is that I'm very concerned at the budget because certain concerns I raised 6 months ago when we were at the outset of the COVID-19 period, those concerns have not been addressed. And it's not as if my concerns have to assume dominance, but every citizen listening to this should be concerned that we appear to be very clearly in a period of reduced resources, increased demands on the state. And yet, within the budget statement, the Minister of Finance could give us half a paragraph that they will bring it soon, they will bring it immediately. And I could tell you, I know Mr. Imbert. Minister Imbert is a very serious, business-like, no-nonsense person. The PNM won this election 7 weeks ago. Where is the procurement law? All of the preparatory work is finished. Where is the procurement law? We need proper law in place for the procurement and the disposal of public property to protect our public money in this country. We have a reduced amount of public money. We have tremendous demands on the state. We have a period of high uncertainty. And if there's one thing we need to be certain about, if we're spending $1 million to buy hampers for needy people, we need to get $1 million worth of hampers.
And one of the things definitely that you were speaking about in the accountability and transparency, and we want to go through that list of concerns that you had 6 months ago, but also definitely that public procurement is one of those things, and we see it especially because it's juxtaposed with the tax or the residential property tax. And so I see some people saying, how can you have one without the other? But before you even respond to that though, take me through that list of 6 months ago.
Well, let me just join up something before I get to the list, DK. Thank you for remembering. The first, just to join up things, when I made my submission 6 months ago to what was called the Roadmap to Recovery team, the Roadmap to Recovery team was inviting submissions. And I had a submission in 2 parts. The first part was that, in fact, whatever the work the committee is doing, you need to be transparent. Because this is a plan to get the entire society into a state of stability and progress. It can't be a plan for a select few. And the second submission I had was that whatever we do, it needs to happen within the framework of the full procurement and disposal of public property law. That Roadmap to Recovery report, what they call a Roadmap to Recovery plan, was filed in Parliament in this country by Dr. Rowley in July 2020. And included in that plan, at page 50, is that the public procurement law and the disposal of public property law needs to be brought in immediately. So what is the delay? What is the delay? PNM won the election 7 weeks ago. If we were serious about doing this, Mr. Imbert would give us a date and say, listen, on the 17th of October, we're signing this thing. Because all of the preparatory work has been finished. And I'm not going to submerge it. It is a matter of the highest possible concern and ought to be a matter of the highest possible concern to all citizens. This is to defend our patrimony and to have a proper hope for a proper future in this country. I'll go into more details about how the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act relates to some of the other elements in the budget as we proceed.
Thank you. So that list of that list of concerns.
Yes, sure. You go ahead.
Yes, so I'm just asking if you can give me a synopsis of that list of concerns or the bullet points.
Sure.
And how
the big ones I would give you are, I noticed Minister Imbert mentioned a liberalization of the petroleum retail sector, in which the gas stations, as we call them in Trinidad and Tobago, would be sold with first preference given to people who have concessions, who are running gas stations now. And that as a second stage of that, there will be a liberalization of the price controls within the petroleum retailing sector. Now, I don't have any expertise about price controls of oil and gas, so I have no comment on that. What I will say is that the disposal of those properties by NP is a disposal of public property, substantial public property of exactly the sort that the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property law is meant to control in the public interest. So that's the first point. The second point is about the public-private partnership. Naturally, in a time of reduced public resources, but increasing demand for public services, the public-private partnership has come to the fore as a method of delivering on some of these requirements in a time when there's very limited resources available from the public purse. The public-private partnership is an area that Trinidad and Tobago has not done well on. When we had the Tobago-Sandals MOU, that was a framework agreement for public-private partnership. A lot of talk, a lot of confidence, and as soon as the details were disclosed, the agreement had to be taken off the table. The details were so scandalous. The exact same thing with the project from HDC to do a public-private partnership with CGGC, the China Ginsburg Group company. 249 houses were to be built. 439 houses, I'm sorry, were to be built. Public-private partnership signed by the minister. And when myself and other colleagues, Anthony Wilson was one of them, and other colleagues, JCC, exposed those details, all of a sudden the contract was revoked. And we have the big question still standing. Did Cabinet approve it or not? The three state-owned hotels, they are public-private partnerships. None of them making a profit. You can't tell anybody the figures. So Trinidad and Tobago has had a very poor track record where public-private partnerships are concerned. Notwithstanding that, the minister is announcing that we're going to do more, and I can understand why he has to do more. But I am saying that the public-private partnerships ought to be governed, and there are requirements in law for them to be governed by the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act. Let's put them under an enhanced framework of governance and oversight to protect the public interest.
Now, one of the things that people are also speaking about is even before I ask that question though, is there anything that stood out to you from the budget presentation yesterday that you said, okay, well, this is a step that we can work forward to something? And this is notwithstanding the need for the public procurement legislation.
Okay. The main thing that jumped out at me as a sign of something positive was the fact that at the end of it all, Minister Imbut made a rather funny joke, because in his third to last paragraph, he made the point that he apologized to the speaker for the fact that the presentation took so long, but he couldn't put everything in, because in fact, if he put everything in, it would have been too long. And of course, this presentation was nearly 3 times as long as the one last year. So that's the one thing I take away from it that gave me a slight smile. There's nothing in it that really made me get impressed. I was very pleased to see housing, the Ministry of Housing. There were layers of housing that the minister explained in his budget presentation. And I think 3 of the layers, if they manage to do it, and I put that if they manage to do it, it will be commendable, because it appears to me that there's some kind of an effort to build affordable housing. And I would like to see some targets attached to that. I would like to see them say 80 to 90% of the housing are to be built for people earning less than $9,000 a month, less than $8,000 a month. We need to make proper provisions from our patrimony for our citizens who are less well off. So the housing provisions in respect of affordability were very welcome.
And we continue this conversation when we return from a break. We're speaking with Afra Raymond, getting a feel of his perception of the budget fiscal 2021. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're speaking with Afra Raymond about his perceptions of the budget presentation, fiscal 2021. Now, Afra, I want to take you back to the point that you spoke about, not necessarily if it's managed to get done, but describing those three levels or those three tiers. Because many times we say there's levels to this. But give me a little better understanding of your take on those levels, thanks.
The affordable housing?
Yes, please.
Yeah. The first level was a type of home that it was described as going up to $250,000, and the monthly payment was about $1,100 to $1,200 a month, and then it was stepping up from that. And the furthest I think the HDC should go in terms of what it's building with our money, because it's taxpayers' money and state land being invested in this affordable housing. The furthest I think they should go is about $500,000 to $600,000. Anything above that isn't to do with HDC. That's preposterous. But there was a level in there, a fifth level, talking about something that $1 million point something. And if you open the newspapers today, you can see developers building, private developers building new private houses of 1.1 and 1.2 and 1.3. What is the state doing in there? There's a phenomenon economists called crowding out. Why is the state crowding out private capital in that market? Let the state take its limited resources. We accept that they're limited, and let's apply them to where they're most needed. Okay? So that's my point. I'd like to make some other point about state property, if I may. I don't know if you have room for that, DK. There's an important point I'd like to make here.
Yes, we get that point from you, and then I want to ask you about partnerships or some potential partnerships. But make that point, thank you.
Sure. What I wanted to say was that we are in a period of adjustment. Dr. Rowley, over the period of the 6 months, when he was making his regular press conferences, regularly called on landlords to have understanding with tenants who may be unemployed or have a drop in their earnings, yes? We were also told that we're sharing this burden and we're all in this together. And what I'd like to say is that the state is actually renting a tremendous amount of property. And as far as I'm concerned, with what's happening out here, with the type of adjustment that has happened in the economy, in terms of the vacant offices, the vacant shops, and the slowdown in the economy, I would be horrified if I found out that the state was paying the same amount this month, October, as they were paying in March or April. There has to be a renegotiation. There has to be a revaluation. There has to be an engagement with landlords to actually cut the state's rental bill. It can't be the same amount of money. No landlord in the country is collecting the same amount of money. Okay? Our firm, we have actually negotiated with our landlords at various properties we rent to reduce the amount of money we paid because of what's happened to business in the year 2020. And I want to put it out there that the government, in the exercise of its mandate, you ask landlords to make a sacrifice, and we're all in this together. Put it to the private landlords from whom the state rents offices. There needs to be a serious, significant negotiation on that point.
Is it tooth bagay across the board? But with that though, in terms of trying to do, because it seems as though we're trying to do more with less.
Yes.
Sometimes as opposed to saying, okay, well, we're actually going to exchange money. What are some of those kind of partnerships, MOUs, ways of being or doing things a little differently that can get us a little further ahead? Because we're not eating the money and you can't use the money as opposed to using the money to get resources. So what are some of those resources and what are some of those partnerships that you see will have an impact in the way that you want it to?
Well, the two big resources the state has at its disposal are state lands, because I'm speaking as a citizen, and one would expect the state to represent our collective interests in these matters. So the first resource the state has available is state land, which in fact is often in good locations for development. So one could actually activate a level of development just by mere possession of the land. So there's that fact, possession is 9/10 of the law. The other fact that is related to the first one, within the hands of the state, although not totally monopolistically so, but within the hands of the state, is the question of approvals. So you have the state controls the bodies that give planning permission, that will give you a water connection, that will give you an electricity connection, and so on and so forth. So in fact, those two things together are significant cards that will give the state an entree to be able to activate a level of development and then activate a level of provision for citizens in the manner that you are referring to, DK.
Okay, and I'll also ask about the amount of involvement that you think is necessary. I recently asked someone the question, how much is too much in terms of involvement? Because I may be a little out of touch with something, or it just may not be my area of expertise, in the sense that I wouldn't want to say, okay, my knowledge of architecture and renting properties is more than yours, even though I may have control of a resource to get something done like that. So how do we facilitate an engagement so that we can foster something that's moving towards, but at the same time, you're not necessarily trying to micromanage, I guess? What is the role there?
What is happening now in terms of housing? Just to pull one example out of the pile. What is happening in terms of housing is the HDC, the Housing Development Corporation, has advertised recently in the press for medium and I would say large contractors over $10 million in turnover to apply to partner with them on the same public-private partnership. They also have another program for SMC, small and medium contractors. And those are ones where there will be a more traditional form of contract where if you build 10 houses as a contractor, you get paid for building 10 houses. Under the public-private partnership with the large contractors, the contractor would be expected to design, finance, and construct and get repaid that money upon sale of the units. So there's a more complex arrangement, which is what we call a public-private partnership. That is the type of arrangement the HGC has been embarking on in the last, I would say, the last 3 to 4 years. Okay, Mahogany Court at Mount Hope with Emily Lias, I think is the first one of those, and the other ones, Bamboo Creek Villas, and then the Chinese 439 units I mentioned. You know.
So we have about 2 minutes more, just about 1.5 minutes more.
Sure.
Where do we go from here? What can we build on? What do we need to focus on? And I say, what do we need to focus on in addition to the public procurement legislation? Because definitely this is one thing we want to see, that the money that is spent goes exactly to X or to Y. You have a minute and a half.
Sure, DK. I thank you for the opportunity. And I would close by saying that we focus on recognizing the rights and the responsibilities of citizenship, recognizing that information and transparency are paramount at this time. It's been recognized by the Court of Appeal, it's been recognized by the High Court, it's been recognized by people, the kind of hunger people have for information. And it's not just Bacchanal, it's about developing our country. We have good people in the country, we have conscientious people in the country, but we need to get a quality of information out there. So it's not just a question of information about how money is spent in terms of the anti-corruption work that is necessary. It's also information about how money is raised. What are the companies that are actually paying tax? What are the companies that are ducking tax? Is there anything we can do to improve how much tax we collect in this country? And property tax is a tiny part of that discussion. But I want to close off in response to your challenge by saying that transparency and accountability are public goods. As much as clean air and clean water and a good health system and a good education system, those are public goods. We have to recognize it and we have to fight for it.
All right, so we want to thank you so much, Afra Raymond. We want to thank you for you sharing your insight, taking the time, and just making sure that there are things on the table that stay on the table and on the agenda. And on behalf of the entire news crew, I'm DK Roster. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Have a good night.